I think we're live. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Chip. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.
So for the people that don't know who you are, what you do, could you kind of highlight who you are, what you do?
Yep,
Yeah.
sure. So Joe Stringer, I currently managing partner at Tenx Health. Been in healthcare for about 23 years. It's the sector I've have always loved. It's endlessly interesting, challenging. You're always learning. For a long time, I was in management consulting in healthcare. So going
Mm,
into hospitals, turning them around. Reconfiguring their processes and so on. But for the last kind of 5 years, I've been an investor in the sector,
mm,
and launched a specialist VC called Tenx Health a couple of years ago.
mm,
And yeah, really, it was just following my passion. I know it sounds like a cliche, Chet, but I got to the point in consulting where it always felt a little bit hands off from the real front line, and
mm,
wanted to get more stuck into health tech in a bigger way, and could just see it's amazing now, seeing what's happening in COVID, but could just see this tidal wave of amazing innovation happening and wanted it to be part of that in a more explicit way rather than just advising on it.
That's really interesting. You worked in the healthcare sector prior to getting into venture, and what made you make that switch now? Because around about 8 years ago, I was working in recruitment, but I was recruiting into the NHS. I found
Mm-hmm.
it was quite difficult to recruit, or I think, well, a lot of program managers mentioned that it was very difficult to adopt new technology. Now,
Mm.
that's kind of changing now. What kind of inspired you to go into venture after what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of reasons really. One was a personal reason. It was, like I said, been in consulting for nearly 20 years,
Mm,
and was in real danger of becoming a bit cynical, of seeing all of the cycles of a sector come and go,
yeah.
and wanted a fresh challenge. But the more important was seeing the
Mm,
gap in the market for around health tech, and that was kind of two things really. One was broader across VC. We did a couple of trips over to Silicon Valley, and it was just staggering seeing the difference between European VC and obviously the mothership over on the West Coast, and
mm,
just seeing how immature European VC still is, and it's coming a long way, and it's maturing quite nicely, but
mm,
yeah, we've got so much further to go compared to the US. So we, being Pooja Sikka, was my co-founder with Tenx, we could see the gap in the market for a much more specialist VC, an investor who really knew the sector inside out and back to front. Because frankly, we saw a lot of good tech investors, but they were guessing when it came to healthcare,
mm,
and we were staggered with some of the businesses that were getting backed, and couldn't work out why other businesses weren't getting backed.
mm,
And it became pretty clear that there was a gap in the market across Europe, not just UK, for an investment team that really knew, not just knew the right ones to pick, but also could actually add value beyond capital. So
mm,
my big kind of and again, this is comes back to comparisons with the US. Capital now is a commodity. It's
mm,
pretty cheap to come by. There's a lot of options for great founders, whether it's debt finance or there's just so many different options to raise money. So
mm,
actually, as a VC investor, you've got to do something else. It's the days of just seeing a check as that your only value is nonsense. So
mm,
we're firm believers in, and everyone talks about being active investors and adding value, but that goes beyond just adding a black book and sharing a few contacts for a few
yeah.
months. It's actually using the skills that we've developed over the past 20
Mm,
years to really hold the hand of each founder to help them scale up. And that's always the challenge in healthcare. It's how do you sell into a beast like the NHS? What are the tactics? What are the things we've learned? What are the things you shouldn't do? How do you avoid wasting precious time and money? So that's why we created Tenx.
I mean, in terms of going back to the core attributes that a health tech only VC needs to kind of have, I mean, obviously you come back, you come from a place where you can add a lot of value in terms of selling into the NHS. Is there anything else that you know? Is there anything else a health tech VC needs to kind of have when backing founders? I'm sure
Yeah.
that must be really different when it comes to seed and then the A round, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a big difference is the due diligence. So we're actually did a quite a funny piece in the Sunday Times a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're working with Tyler Schultz, who's the whistleblower from Theranos, because
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah. So honestly, he's an amazing guy. We met him at an event out in Dubai, and just an impressive individual. To be that young, to stand up to his own grandfather as the main investor in Theranos, to be sued by, it's just an incredible story. But for us, he really espoused all of the values that you need to succeed in health tech. You need to, and that's the scary thing, is people see tech investing across the board, and actually the rules of health tech investing are very different. You can't fake it till you make it. You can't, because these are people's lives. It's not, it's one thing if someone's pizza doesn't arrive because of the latest delivery app. It's a bit different when you're promising the next cure for cancer. So so that's the dynamic we're trying to introduce, is a much more honest, authentic approach to that DD process. And that obviously adds a lot of value to the business in the long run. And also, I'd like to think you've got to understand the value system of a lot of founders. We meet a lot of founders who finally meet us and think, okay, yeah, these guys get it. They understand why I'm doing this. Yes, it's great to get a financial opportunity, but actually, most founders now, it's not just about the financial opportunity. It's about having a real impact. Life is very short, so there's no point, wasting time on doing something you're not passionate about.
Yeah, I can, yeah. I mean, in terms of well, I mean, I'm gonna have to mention the C word,
Mm.
COVID-19.
Yeah.
Um, um, how have you seen the strategic role and the brand value of the NHS around the world,
Mm.
especially around, say, emerging markets?
Yeah. So the NHS, I mean, it is something, it's an organisation that is now, I mean, it's dear to everyone's hearts. It's always been dear to my heart. My family worked in it for years, and a lot of them are no longer around. And it's something, that, and obviously, Pooja, as my co-founder, she's still a practicing GP. So and it's one of the most amazing organizations that I think you can ever. Yes, it has its moments and it can be frustrating and it's not perfect, but actually, as a system, it's one of the things. Without getting too profound, it's one of the reasons I live in this country. I had a horrific experience in in the US, with my own father, and it just summed up everything that's wrong about the US healthcare system. So, and actually, as very often for folks that live in this country, we don't realise how valuable the NHS is, not just to ourselves, but around the world. And that's based on a number of measures, quality of care, affordability, efficiency. It consistently ranks really highly, even though a lot of people, have historically liked to knock it. And that's part of the investment strategy that we have around Tenx, was seeing the opportunity to lift some of the best innovations from the UK from the NHS into the fastest growing healthcare markets, particularly India and the Middle East, where the Indian and Middle East healthcare systems see a huge amount of value in the NHS. They very often, if you go to somewhere like Qatar or Dubai, you're more than likely to bump into an ex-NHS doctor anyway. It's chock full of of UK expats.
Yeah.
So there's quite a strong cultural brand link, and innovation and quality link between those regions. Probably more so than the US. So a lot the traditional path for a lot of founders in health tech is prove it in the UK and then jump to the US as quickly as possible. It's a bit like successful pop acts. They it's they're trying to crack the US market, whereas we take a counter view, which is the bigger opportunity is in the emerging markets, where there's massive unmet need. You still got the reach of technology, but without a lot of the vested interests and historic bureaucracy of more developed healthcare systems.
I mean, coming from coming from a healthcare background before going into investment, you mentioned, yes, we do like to complain about the NHS, and you're actively helping startups, break into the NHS. I mean, what regulatory changes or what nuances do you wish were in place to help speed up the adoption of technology into the NHS?
Yeah, so well, it's less about regulatory changes. So,
Okay.
so I think if anything, the regulatory landscape is going to get tougher. So now we've got prescribing of apps. A lot of them now being seen as medical devices, therefore are going to be subject to more regulation. So and that's quite right. They need a lot more control and proof points, and for the best founders, that's an opportunity. It shouldn't be seen as a hurdle. It's an opportunity to differentiate yourself. On the more optimistic note, I think on the back of COVID, I think there's a recognition within the NHS that things need to be done more efficiently, particularly procurement. I mean, it's the dreaded word that a lot of people complain about when selling into the NHS. But I think now, with something like the urgency of COVID, we've a lot of the decision makers in the NHS have been able to show that they can use some common sense around a lot of those procurement decisions and pick the right technologies quickly. And I think that the whole supply chain landscape, the procurement landscape in the NHS is improving. It was improving pre-COVID anyway, but the level of fragmentation is definitely going to come down. Particularly, there's inevitably going to be some element of reorganization once the dust has settled on COVID, and we're predicting that to be much more around vertical integration within geographic regions. So there's going to be the pendulum is swinging back to the power base being in fewer regions across the NHS. And that's, for any founder, that's great news, because you're no longer selling to 300 different organizations. You're probably selling to about 40 or 50. So that should be seen as an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think the role of health tech investors is going to adjust, post COVID, in terms of prioritizing their investments, and then also, I guess more around prioritizing their investments. I mean, do you think investors are going to have to put more of an emphasis in, generating revenue straight away? But how can that be the case with healthcare? Because I mean, it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, I don't think for the decent investors, I don't think it's going to significantly change their criteria. Okay. I think the criteria remain the same. It's more the challenge, if I'm honest, is deal flow. It's just coping with the sheer volume now of opportunities coming through. when we first launched Tenx, we were looking at anything up to 20 investment opportunities a week. That's probably risen to about 30 now, just with the sheer magnetic force of COVID attracting that amount of deal flow. So I think that it's more of a capacity challenge than a prioritization one. I guess the only difference now is the pace of adoption. So that has been the silver lining of COVID, is we're seeing rates of adoption now that frankly we could have only have dreamt of a year ago, which is amazing. We're meeting historically some quite cynical, some quite change resistant, particularly clinical leaders, who are now just saying, give me the tools, give me the technology to do my job without needing to physically meet people. So, and that's amazing. That can only be a force for good. And it's not, this isn't just about Matt Hancock standing up and waving another, GP consultation app around, because there's a lot more to health tech than virtual consultation. Unfortunately, it's become the kind of lightning rod for all of health tech. But some of the things that excite us are the other things that are now being offered straight to consumers through the doorstep. A lot of the diagnostic tools that are available, a lot of the blood testing that's now available, they're some of the things that excite us, which can be combined with those, the virtual consultation tools. So, and honestly, we will look back in 10 years' time. We'll look back at this year as being the year it changed, and that's what excites me, is just how quickly things are going to change over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, we saw a couple of companies really rise up and make a massive difference. I mean, I had a company I spoke to previously, Accurix, did an amazing job just over the weekend coming up with coming up with a solution for GPs. I mean, what are the core attributes of the companies that have really stepped up to the plate and being what were the attributes of and characteristics of the companies that really stepped up and made a huge difference? I mean, I'm sure Pando and Lantum, did a great job as well. I mean, could you kind of highlight a little bit more? Could you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it? Because there's some of the best founders are the most opportunistic, and they see an opportunity to pivot their business. And I think the best ones already had a solid base and a solid platform, a solid product, and it just took a slight, an incremental shift to focus on a COVID relevant solution. So we've seen some slightly desperate pivots where you're literally trying to turn an apple into a pear, and it just doesn't work. But actually, a lot of the best performers, the likes of Pando, Advise Inc., they already had good traction, and it was a case of just slightly fine tuning the proposition to be much more COVID relevant, and they're the ones that, and I know a lot of those founders, and they've done it genuinely for the right reasons. They've done it. It was, first and foremost, it was to help the NHS. It wasn't about the commercial opportunity. And if that commercial opportunity comes later, then great. But very often, a lot of them haven't made huge amounts of revenue from it. It's more about cementing that relationship with some of their key clients across the NHS. It's being shown that they have been prepared to step up at the right time. So Advise Inc., they're guys I know really well. They essentially they're Go Compare for price comparison across the NHS, and their role around the PPE shortage has been incredible. Sometimes despite some of the best efforts of those at the centre to try and scupper it, but what they've been able to do to help local NHS trusts shine a light on PPE stocks has been incredible. So
mm,
it's those kind of guys that have really proven themselves, and it's more about their standing and their reputation than the actual revenue right now.
mm. On your article, you kind of highlight. I'll kind of paraphrase it. I mean, it is in the early days, of course, but some of the most interesting lessons we see from COVID-19 are those we intuitively knew, but needed
Mhm.
more evidence. And then you kind of highlighted leadership is paramount, clinical governance and evidence.
Mm.
Prioritize the last click, which kind of highlighted the procurement process and this and selling into the NHS. I mean, could you kind of expand on those points? I mean, because they were really fascinating.
Yeah. So it's things that it feels like with COVID.
Mm,
For a long time there was this, a bit of a clique around UK health tech,
yeah.
where you would bump into a lot of the same faces, the same sort of 50 faces around the system,
Yeah.
time and time again, and we were all saying the same thing, which is what the system needs, or what the right solutions were,
Hmm.
and uh, you're right there.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just,
it's fine. It's fine.
um, yeah. So and a lot of those things we knew in terms of what makes a great health tech business. So yes, great clinical governance. Yes, great leadership.
Hmm.
Keeping an eye on the revenue stream. But all of a sudden with COVID, it felt like the rest of the world suddenly knew about it.
Yeah.
And it's just been amazing to see the level of interest in the. I never thought I would see pieces on the 10 o'clock news every other night about health tech.
Mm,
It's
mm,
slightly surreal, actually. It kind
yeah.
of feels like your pet topic has suddenly become the thing that a lot of people want to talk about, which has been great. It's been great for the sector overall. And a lot of those things are now being shown to be right. So at some point there'll be a group of the same 50 people, are able to say, "We told you so." But I think it's a bit early for that.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to kind of highlight is your perspective on, one thing you mentioned was, you kind of wanted to discuss a need for a grown-up discussion on the use of data in healthcare.
Mm,
I mean, I'd really like for you to kind of
mm.
expand on that.
Yeah, so this was it's always been a bit of a
Mm,
bugbear of mine. Is there's there's this natural tension between data privacy
mm,
and sharing data for the greater good, and sharing data to develop world leading solutions to detect cancer more quickly, for example.
mm,
And that's always been a natural tension. My frustration pre-COVID was, it was always a very hypothetical discussion. It was always, what if that data got shared? What if I don't trust the person I'm sharing that with? And invariably, sometimes quite rightly, but invariably, everyone sided on the privacy side of things. Just in case, let's not share any kind of data, even though normally it was completely anonymized, could never been traced back, and so on.
mm,
And that was quite frustrating, because at the end of the day, the yes, everyone was able to hold on to their personal data, and it is very personal data. There's nothing
mm.
more personal than healthcare data.
Yeah.
But that was coming at a hell of a price, which was stopping innovation.
Mm,
It was stopping breast cancer getting detected early. It was killing people. And I think now, and by grown up debate, I mean, this now with COVID, it's no longer hypothetical. There is a very real decision, for example, on track and trace. There is a very real decision between how much data privacy do we want versus killing people.
mm,
And that sounds quite dramatic, but it is. It's as simple
mm,
as that. It's how, and there's a path to be steered through that debate.
mm,
But now at least we've got a use case. We've got a very real example
Mm,
of of how to navigate that debate. And I think now some common sense is starting to appear, where the guidelines are being followed, around data privacy, but we're seeing some great outcomes in terms of jumping on hotspots more quickly. And yeah, okay, maybe track and trace is a bad example, because people's experience of it is quite, you sort of walk into a pub
mhm,
and give a phone number, but actually behind the scenes you'd
yeah.
be amazed at how much technology is being used to jump on the spikes in numbers. And but for me, it was just part of a bigger debate around people being more up for sharing their data in the right way to
Mm,
improve health outcomes.
mm,
Because at the end of the day, 1 in 2 of us will get some kind of cancer. And I
mm,
don't know about you, I'd far rather share a little bit of my data to
mm,
try and prevent that.
mm,
And so yeah, that's what we mean around a grown-up debate,
mm.
and that's now happening. And thankfully, again, it's happening in circles that really matter beyond just the usual suspects that have been talking about it for years.
Yeah, I mean, there's always two sides of the story. I mean, what needs to, what can be done to kind of put people more at ease about the use of their data?
Mm.
Um, I mean, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's thankfully now, with GDPR, it's incredible. A lot of I was at Slush, the tech conference
Yeah.
in Helsinki last year, and it was amazing to see some of the stands of the big tech firms talking about GDPR as being the gold
Mm,
standard of data privacy compared to the US or elsewhere.
yeah.
And that, so actually, there's no need for a new magic bullet. We're actually following a lot of sensible protocols
Mm,
already. Now, obviously, we've got to make sure the right founders are following those those regulations in the first place. But that, as long as we're following sensible data privacy laws and laws around use of clinical information, which again have been in place for nearly decades now, um, then we're okay.
mm,
That's enough. It's not. This doesn't need new regulation. It's just following the great regulation we've got in the first place. Obviously, making sure it's policed,
mm,
um, and yeah, and then we'll be able to drive to the right outcomes.
mm.
So it's not. That's the funny thing. It's not a new discussion.
Yeah.
It just so happens that we've now got a very, very real test case.
Hmm. That kind of covers most of the things that I wanted to cover
Mm.
throughout this conversation. I think we're right on 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of highlight towards the end, really, I mean, where people can find you, and are there particular types of companies you'd really like for them to reach out to you? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
are there any white spaces you'd love to invest in right
Oh
now?
God, yeah, so many. So, in terms of kind of plea, so just a plea is don't use don't use LinkedIn Messenger, because it lights up like a Christmas tree every time. So it just generally that is not an effective way. So yeah, I mean the best way is through a warm introduction. I know that's a really annoying response, but the network is a great filter. So try and reach out to someone as a sort of secondhand introduction. In terms of the white space, the areas that really excite me are AI, where there's actual AI solutions in diagnostics where there's actual data. So the technology itself is relatively commoditized, but where there's a decent sample of data. Second area is in remote diagnostics. Third is in genomics. So that's genomics is an amazing space that we see as exploding. And then the rest is around digital wellness. So not just reactive healthcare, but areas around mental health in particular. We see that not as white space, but there's a lot of opportunity there now, particularly around employee health. So there's some of the more exciting areas that we see are going to take off pretty quickly.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about is the rise in femtech.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's I mean, again, we'll look back in 10 years' time and see, how didn't that happen sooner? But we see that as one of our kind of 8 really hot emerging trends. Is health tech solutions that have been specifically developed, and that is a massive market opportunity. I mean, the lovely side effect is very often it attracts a lot of female founders who are brilliant. I know you interviewed the team at Vine Health recently. They're an amazing team and absolutely smashing it. So, but the main reason we're interested is the market opportunity. It's such an untapped market at the moment in a lot of those very specific solutions. But I have to be frank, I'm very pleased. Sometimes when we're discussing some of those solutions, I'm incredibly pleased to have a female co-founder as well, with a deeper understanding of the problem statement.
So. So in terms of finding you, I mean, you said through introductions.
My email address is on our website. So just bear with me if I don't respond, because there is a lot of interest out there.
I really appreciate you taking the time out this morning. Thank you so much.
No worries. Yeah, great to speak to you. Yeah. Cheers,
Take care. Bye.
Have a good day. Thanks. Bye.